See, once known as Hochelaga by the Huron people, it was the French navigator Jacques Cartier who first set foot on its shores during his daring voyage to the New World in 1535 to 1536. Picture over 1,000 Native Americans extending a warm embrace on the slopes of a magnificent mountain, Montreal. But as the years passed, Montreal's destiny remained in the hands of fate. It was more than 5 decades before another Frenchman, the founder of Quebec City, Samuel de Champlain, returned to the city. Yet the once vibrant Huron had vanished, leaving Champlain with a vision of untapped potential, a fur trade haven. With a vision of flame, he cleared the land and christened it Place Royale. However, his ambition never really truly materialized into anything. You see, Montreal's origins emerged not as a fur trade fort, but as a fervent missionary center. It was the visionary founder, Paul de Chemedy, Sieur de Maisonneuve, who breathed life into this small settlement in May 1642. With unvarying devotion, he christened it Ville-Marie. Amidst the rugged wilderness, Paul de Chemedy, Sieur de Maisonneuve, laid the foundation of a burgeoning settlement, Ville-Marie. With determination and foresight, he erected dwellings, a chapel, a hospital, and other essential structures, fortifying the community with a protective stockade against indigenous attacks. Yet, the path to prosperity was fraught with challenges. You see, the Iroquois aligned with the British, and they launched relentless assaults on the settlement. The echoes of conflict were constant through the years until a momentous peace treaty, La Grande Paix, was finally negotiated in 1701, ushering in an era of relative calm. Montreal's journey from a humble missionary settlement to a flourishing fur trade center is a tale of strategic location and rival ambitions. You see, Samuel de Champlain was onto something. Its favorable position along the St. Lawrence River allowed for easy access to the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico, while the Ottawa River watershed facilitated movement west and north, creating a vast fur empire that France's rival, Britain, sought to control. As Montreal emerged as the epicenter of the fur trade, it held a pivotal role in shaping the destiny of the region. However, despite its crucial transportation hub status, rapid population growth did not follow suit. By 1700, the population numbered fewer than 1,000. They were a small community with grand ambitions, yet the tide of immigration and the encouragement of settlement through the French seigneurial system breathed new life into Montreal. In just a few decades, the population surged to approximately 5,000 people, and this was around 1750. As we all know though, the New World was full of conflicts, and amidst the fierce military conflict between Britain and France, a defining moment took shape on the historic plains of Abraham, near Quebec City. In 1759, the British emerged victorious in this pivotal battle, marking a turning point in the fate of the region. The following year, in 1760, Montreal chose a different path, surrendering peacefully to British forces. With this surrender, Montreal, along with the entirety of New France, became an integral part of the vast British North American Empire in 1763. As the years marched on, Montreal's landscape evolved, and the fur trade slowly waned. Yet, the city's growth knew no bounds. Embracing its role as a thriving transportation hub, Montreal adapted with the times. The city shifted its strategy from shipment of furs to the trading of timber and agricultural produce, propelling it into the era of modernity. In 1796, a milestone was reached with the opening of Canada's very first public library. A year later, daily postal service was established, forging a vital connection between Montreal and the United States, further fostering the city's prominence. The visionary John Molson, an entrepreneur, brewer, and banker, left a great mark on Montreal's history. In 1809, he linked Montreal and Quebec City by water with the inauguration of the first Canadian steamship, paving the way for greater accessibility and commerce. In 1817, Canada witnessed the birth of its first bank, the renowned Bank of Montreal, which played a pivotal role in shaping the country's financial landscape. The city's progress continued with the commencement of La Chine Canal in 1821, a feat that would effectively pave the way for the future St. Lawrence Seaway, opening up new horizons for trade and industry. As Canada expanded its horizons, Montreal emerged as a key player, becoming the nerve center for two transcontinental railways, the Canadian Pacific Railway and the Canadian National Railway. These rails linked the country from coast to coast, opening up a vast new territory for farming, forestry, and mining. The surge in economic activity led to a boom in population and demand for finished goods, transforming Montreal into Canada's primary manufacturing, transportation, and financial hub. Innovation became the hallmark of Montreal's progress. The city saw its first electric lighting in 1882, electric tramways in 1892, and the advent of automobiles cruising along its streets and movie houses adorning its sidewalks in 1903. Post-World War II, North America experienced prosperity, and Montreal was no exception. The city's manufacturing industries expanded to meet the needs of a burgeoning population. An urban transformation took place with iconic landmarks such as Place Ville-Marie, the Metro public transportation system, and the grand hosting of Expo 67, putting Montreal on the international stage. But success had its challenges. While Montreal successfully won the bid to host the 1976 Olympic Games, the financial burden from building and maintaining facilities, including the Olympic Stadium, weighed heavily on the province and took until 2006 to be fully paid off. Montreal's journey was not just one of prosperity. It also played a significant role in Quebec's Quiet Revolution from 1960 to 1966. This period of liberal activism and reform fueled a growing sense of Quebecois nationalism and a recognition of the economic disparities faced by the province's francophone majority population. You see, the anglophone minority were in control of much of Quebec's economy, and this was centered in Montreal. The rise of the Parti Québécois in 1976 marked a political manifestation of this nationalism, seeking independence for Quebec through provincial referendums in 1980 and 1995. While both referendums ultimately failed, they impacted Montreal in a big way. A loss of business and population affected the city for several years, but it landed on its feet. Montreal now remains a dynamic city with a diverse economy and beautiful culture. It also has a growing population. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Write down in the comments what you'd like to see next. And if you have any other comments to add to this video, make sure to leave it down. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Victoria is the capital city of British Columbia, located on the southern tip of Vancouver Island off Canada's Pacific coast. The population of the city proper is around 91,000, and the greater Victoria area has a population of close to 400,000 people. Victoria is also the 7th highest population density in Canada. The city, which was named after Queen Victoria, is one of the oldest in the Pacific Northwest, with the British settlement dating back to 1843. And unlike most North American cities, the city has kept many of its historic buildings, including its two most famous landmarks, the Parliament Buildings and the Empress Hotel. Not only is Victoria a historically significant city, but it's also home to a diverse range of cultures. Like, did you know it has the 2nd oldest Chinatown in North America, only behind San Francisco? Make sure you like and subscribe, and let's talk about Victoria. Prior to the arrival of these European navigators in the late 1700s, the Victoria area was home to several coast-Salish communities. European adventurers would come close to Victoria on numerous occasions, but the actual first European to set foot in the Victoria area was in 1790. The first settlement in Victoria began as a trading post, because in 1841, most countries were still in an imperialistic mindset, trying to expand their empire, and the United States was no exception. You see, the Oregon boundary dispute, also known as the Oregon Question, was a 19th century territorial dispute over the political division of North America's Pacific Northwest between several nations with competing territorial and commercial interests in the region. This included not only Americans but also Russians. Keep in mind that at the time, British Columbia was under the jurisdiction of Rupert's Land, and Fort Vancouver, believe it or not, was already an existing trading post. With all of this mystery and potential US annexation talks, the British decided to establish a trading post on the southern tip of Vancouver Island. This was done by James Douglas. And you see, the reasoning behind this trading post, well, is that it could serve as a backup fort if the Americans ever took Fort Vancouver, and it worked out pretty well for the British. You see, Douglas established Fort Victoria on the site of present-day Victoria in anticipation of the outcome of the Oregon Treaty in 1846. which extended the British North America/United States border along the 49th parallel from the Rockies to the Strait of Georgia. Built in 1843 as a trading post for the Hudson's Bay Company on what was originally known as Camelsack, which means rush of water, the settlement was briefly known as Fort Albert before being renamed Fort Victoria in honor of Queen Victoria in November 1843. Victoria would remain a small community though of less than 1,000 people until gold was discovered, and when the news reached San Francisco in 1858, well, let's just say Victoria grew pretty quickly, from a population of 300 to over 5,000 in a few days. You see, Victoria was a port, supply base, and outfitting center for miners on their way to the Fraser Canyon goldfields. Over 30,000 gold miners passed through Victoria in just 2 months on their way to the Fraser Valley, miners needing a mining license from Victoria before heading to the mainland. Many came from the United States where they had taken part in the 1848 California gold rush, but others came from all over the continent and Europe. This influx of people aided its incorporation as a city in 1862. Not only was Victoria a great place for miners, but the Port of Victoria also became one of North America's largest opium importers in the latter half of the 19th century. It served as the Hong Kong opium trade and distribution into North America. The opium trade had been legal and unregulated until 1865, when the legislature issued licenses and imposed duties on its import and sale. The opium trade would not be prohibited until 1908. However, things would begin to calm down. With the completion of the Canadian Pacific Railway terminus on Bird Inlet in 1886, Victoria's position as British Columbia's commercial center was irreversibly lost to the city of Vancouver. As a result of cultivating an image of genteel civility within its natural setting, the city was able to adapt and thrive. This was aided by impressions of visitors such as Rudyard Kipling, the opening of the popular Butchart Gardens in 1904, and the Canadian Pacific Railway construction of the Empress Hotel in 1908. This marked the beginning of a massive real estate boom. However, this real estate and development boom came to an end shortly before World War I, leaving Victoria with a large stock of Edwardian public, commercial, and residential buildings that have greatly contributed to the city's character. Victoria's importance as a commercial entity gradually declined, but this gave rise to a more traditional capital city economy. You see, their economy is now primarily based on government functions and tourism. Victoria is a major tourism destination, attracting over 3.5 million overnight visitors each year, who contribute more than $1 billion to the local economy. The city is home to Canada's Western Naval Base, as well as a significant fishing fleet. Along with marine, forestry, and agricultural research, the area's largest industries now include a thriving information technology sector with annual revenues exceeding $4 billion. The University of Victoria, Camosun College, and Rolls-Royce University are among the educational institutions in Victoria. Victoria is also known as the Garden City for good reasons. Its most popular garden attraction is undoubtedly the world-class Butchart Gardens. It was founded in 1904 by the wife of a prominent cement manufacturer in nearby Brentwood Bay. The beautiful garden features Japanese and Italian gardens, as well as an annual flower count which goes on every February. The gardens and the Butchart residence have been designated as a Canadian National Historic Site. Victoria is visually stunning from a geographical standpoint. The southeastern coast of Vancouver Island is highly irregular, with natural deep harbors and a jumble of peninsulas. It's shielded from the open Pacific Ocean's direct storms and high seas, which have proven to be a significant advantage for Victoria's settlement and development over time. And as the city grows, I'm sure it'll only become more appealing. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Nunavut is Canada's most sparsely populated province. It's also the country's largest and most northern territory. Created in 1999 with the Nunavut Act, it is also the most recent major change in the country's map since Newfoundland's admission in 1949. While it may appear recent, this territory, this piece of land, has long been inhabited by the Inuit and Dorset cultures for a long time, and now sadly many of these original villages no longer exist. So today let's look at 3 different ghost towns in Nunavut and explain their history and why they may no longer be inhabited. Now, there are many definitions of ghost towns, but the villages we're looking at today have no inhabitants. So without further ado, make sure you subscribe and let's dive into Nunavut's ghost towns. Our first stop is Dundas Harbor, an abandoned settlement in Nunavut's Qikiqtaaluk region. You see, this settlement was originally established to combat the illegal whaling industry in Nunavut, and it was leased by the mighty Hudson's Bay Company in 1933. The following year, 50 Inuit arrived at the settlement, but they did not stay for long as they returned to the mainland 13 years later. They attempted to re-establish it as a patrol station in the late 1940s, but the ice proved too difficult and it was abandoned once more. This RCMP outpost did not last long, but a few buildings remain, and it's also home to one of Canada's most northern cemeteries. While this is an abandoned settlement, you can still visit it if you have a small little $17,000 to spare. And now the RCMP also visits the settlement on an annual basis to ensure the cemetery is still in good condition. This is an excellent example of early Canadian efforts to achieve true sovereignty in the high Arctic. But moving forwards, we have another trading post that was established by the Hudson's Bay Company, and this will be a recurring theme throughout the video. You see, at the time, the Hudson's Bay Company was the largest and strongest commercial entity in Canada, and is still the oldest company in Canada today. But it's important to note that back in those days, it was primarily used as a fur trading company. The Hudson's Bay Company established Fort Ross in 1937. Its establishment was intended to capitalize on the island's fur opportunities and to facilitate company trade passing through the Bellot Strait. Lawrence Learmonth, the company's first manager and longtime trader, chose this exact location. The post was also named after John Ross and James Clark Ross, two related Arctic explorers. Its four structures, which included the post manager's house, a powerhouse, a warehouse, and a store, were constructed over the course of 5 days in September 1937. Following the arrival of the icebreaker SS Naskopi on September 2nd, which brought construction and food supplies. The Naskopi's first resident included Lorenz and other post staffs, including 2 clerks, as well as 3 Inuit families from Cape Dorset who built their homes near the 4 post build. However, this arrangement did not last long. Following the annual resupply of the post in 1941, the Naskopi's next 2 resupplies in 1942 and 1943 failed to reach Fort Ross due to ice conditions. After the Naskopi was forced to return in September 1943, plans were made to evacuate the post staff because food supplies were beginning to run low, despite rationing and supplementing supplies through hunting. At the time, reaching the settlement was nearly impossible, and because all Canadian planes capable of performing the evacuation were unavailable due to the country's involvement in World War II, the Canadian government required assistance from the United States. A USAAF Douglas C-47 Skytrain was outfitted for the trip in November, and on the 4th of November, supplies were airdropped and the USAF captain, J.F. Stanwell Fletcher, parachuted down to the post to prepare a landing site for the plane, and this marked the first parachute jump north of the Arctic Circle. So as you can see, this settlement and economic effort quickly devolved into a rescue mission, with food running out and ice conditions worsening. On November 7th, after preparing a landing strip on a small lake about 10 miles away from the post, the plane landed, dropped off the remaining supplies for the Inuit population, and quickly took off again, successfully evacuating the post's 3 employees. The Inuit living there were given ammunition, flour, and staples to last them through the winter, but this was the only assistance they received. Even after my research, I still don't know what happened to the Inuit population living there, but they did know the territory much better and were much better hunters. Our final stop is Killinick on Killinick Island, which is a former Inuit settlement, weather station, trading post, missionary post, fishing station, and Royal Canadian Mounted Police post. It was previously part of Labrador, and then the Northwest Territories, and is now part of Nunavut. Unlike our 2 other settlements, this one actually has a long history. You see, the Killinick locality first appears in 1569, and it was visited in 1587 by John Davis, one of Queen Elizabeth's first chief navigator. He led several expeditions to discover the Northwest Passage and served as pilot and captain on both Dutch and British ships. In August 1592, he even discovered the Falkland Islands, but returning to Killinick, it was far from abandoned throughout the 1800s, with a weather station installed, training posts, and numerous visits from missionaries and researchers studying Inuit culture. However, this expansion would not last long. Although the Kalinic Inuit were recognized as a signatory to the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement in November 1975, this did not prevent a gradual deterioration in government services and programs. This decline created an insecure environment, resulting in a slow out-migration of families seeking settlements with guaranteed access to essential services, particularly medical and air transportation. 50 Inuit left Kalinick between November 1975 and February 1978 in search of a more secure environment. On February 8, 1978, the 47 people who remained were informed by radio that the Northwest Territories government was sending planes to remove them from the community and that the settlement would be closed. This Inuit settlement is one of the largest that is now abandoned, with a peak estimate population of 200 residents. And now you see throughout this video there was a pattern where the federal government and trading posts would create these settlements, most likely without knowledge of the actual weather conditions there, which caused the abandonment of our first two settlements in this video. And now if you like this brief overview, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Quebec City is the capital of Quebec, and it's also one of the oldest cities in Canada and North America. Did you know it celebrated its 400th anniversary in 2008? To put that in context, Toronto, Canada's largest city, is only about 230 years old. Today, I'd like to go over Quebec City's history to understand why it is the way it is and how it has managed to retain its old world character and charm throughout the years. But enough yapping, make sure you subscribe and let's get right into this. Now, Quebec City is a French city. The first European to set foot on the current city was Jacques Cartier, who was looking for a path to Asia like many of his contemporaries, who landed on the New World. You see, they were looking for a new path to Asia because the Ottoman Empire possessed a route to Asia at the time, and these European countries desired to establish a new path so they could get their hands on rich minerals like gold, diamonds, as well as spices and other essential resources. Jacques Cartier made it up to Quebec during his second trip. You see, during this second trip, he decided to go up the St. Lawrence River in 1535. He actually wintered with the Huron village in Stadacona, which is the site of present-day Quebec. However, as I mentioned, he was only there for the winter. We would need to wait until 1541 for Jacques Cartier to come back and try his shot at establishing a French colony in the area. However, this was a complete failure, and they abandoned the effort just a few years later. From 1541 to, 1600, there wasn't much action from the European side in present-day Quebec, because after his trips, Jacques Cartier realized there wasn't much of value in the territory. So it's pretty difficult to fund a large trip when you can't promise any returns to the nobles and kings of Europe. But this really changed in 1600 when fur became a valuable commodity used in clothing and hat making. And due to this valuable resources, this is when we see a permanent settlement in present-day Quebec, and this was done by Samuel Le Champlain in 1608. Although it was only a trading post that was used to sell furs and trade them with the First Nations, who just better understood the countries and how to hunt the beavers. But as you might expect, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. No, far from it. The St. Lawrence and its tributaries provided the French with the finest access to North America's interior and dominance over the fur trade, an advantage that the British sought. Quebec, the protector of New France, was constantly under attack. It was conquered by the British in 1629 and held by them until 1632, when the Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye returned it to France. Other British attempts to conquer this bastion failed until the legendary Battle of Quebec on the Plains of Abraham in 1759. And it was a decisive defeat for the French. The entire combat lasted less than an hour, with generals on both sides dying on the battlefield and for moons the next day. You probably already know what's coming after this defeat. The Treaty of Paris in 1763, which granted Britain control of the majority of French territory in the New World. But unlike the usual story of British assimilation, they were actually tolerant compared to other nations, and this was pretty much caused by the American Revolution, where, fearing a French revolt, they allowed French Canadians to speak French and practice their religion. causing Quebec City to become a pillar or the center of French culture in North America. While their economy was not as large as Montreal, Quebec City remained a major economic force in Quebec and remains so to this day. However, they saw considerably more boom and bust cycles, relying primarily on forestry to power their economy until rails began to appear, connecting Quebec City to Montreal, Maine, and other important population centers. But enough with the history, let's look at a more modern Quebec City. Because Quebec is a capital city, government servants and administrators make up a sizable component of the city's service sector. Quebec is also a major transatlantic port, handling products, mostly bulk cargo, transported over the St. Lawrence Seaway, which serves North America's Great Lakes region. The port, rail connections, and freeways also help the manufacturing economy, which includes newsprint, drinks and food processing, chemicals, printing, clothing, and shipbuilding. The city is divided into 3 districts: Upper Town, Lower Town, and Saint-Roch. Upper Town, as the name implies, is located on the militarily strategic high ground of Cape Diamond, also known as Cap Diamant. The former commercial Lower Town is located between the banks of the St. Lawrence River and Cape Diamond. Saint-Roch is located in the lower lands east of Lower Town near the St. Charles River. Old Quebec is the hub of Upper Town, surrounded by a 2.9-mile-long stone wall built in the early 19th century to safeguard the city from a feared invasion by the United States. And, fun fact, it's North America's sole remaining walled city north of Mexico. Moving on, one significant cultural structure dominates Quebec City, and of course I'm referring to the lovely Chateau Frontenac Hotel. The copper-turred castle-like hotel's construction began in 1893, with its notable central tower added in 1924. A lengthy avenue behind the hotel overlooks Lower Town and the St. Lawrence River. And now these fancy hotels were built when trains began to dominate Canada, and while the Chateau Frontenac is one of the most famous, there are many hotels similar to it around Canada, such as in Banff. The Lower Town is linked to the Upper Town by steep roads and staircases, as well as the funicular, a more than 130-year-old cable vehicle. Taverns, cafes, and stores occupy the small, irregular cobblestone alleyways that extend nearly to the riverfront at Place Royale, Lower Town's old commercial center. The industrial, manufacturing, transportation, and warehouse district of Quebec City, Saint-Roch, was home to the working class. It is still a manufacturing site, but regeneration programs that began in the 1990s turned abandoned warehouses and industrial buildings into a pedestrian-friendly business neighborhood brimming with artists, craftspeople, and small cafes. The bulk of Quebec's 600,000 population are Roman Catholic and French-speaking. Nonetheless, English is widely used, particularly in tourist areas. All of this is to say that Quebec City is a true gem in Canada, brimming with heritage and culture, and I would definitely suggest everyone to go visit it. If you learned anything new about Quebec City, please let me know in the comments section below, as well as what you'd like to see next. I'll see you again soon. Before the cars, before the skyscrapers. Toronto wasn't always the biggest and most important city in Canada. You see, for most of its history, it was actually second to Montreal. So what changed? Follow me as we dive into the history of Toronto. Now you see, the land where Toronto now sits, it's been inhabited for thousands of years by the Huron-Wendat population. But sadly, as most parts of the continent, the arrival of Europeans in the late 16th century changed this place forever. The first Europeans to establish a trading post here were actually the French. In 1750, they founded Fort Rouillé, near the mouth of the Humber River. And while this wasn't a real colony quite yet, this post helped maintain French influence in the region, something that didn't last long. You see, in the 1750s, trouble was brewing in Europe. You see, Europe, more precisely Western Europe, wasn't a peaceful place like today. The mid-18th century was a time of immense political tension and colonial rivalries across Europe. Major powers like Britain, France, and Prussia sought to expand their empires, leading to escalating conflicts over territorial claims. It all began as a series of regional disputes, which eventually snowballed into a worldwide war. Known as the 7 Years' War, and this conflict, as its name entails, lasted 7 long years, from 1756 to 1763, and it involved nations from Europe, North America, and beyond. The war spanned multiple continents, with battles taking place in Europe, North America, the Caribbean, and even India. The major powers fought for supremacy and control over valuable colonial territories, trade routes, and resources. One of the key flashpoints was a struggle between Britain and France for dominance in North America. The conflict spilled over into the American colonies and set the stage for future conflicts that would eventually lead to the American Revolution. But that's a different story. As the war raged on, alliances shifted, and military strategies evolved. Ultimately, the 7 Years' War resulted in several pivotal outcomes that reshaped the global landscape. In 1763, the Treaty of Paris marked the official end of the war. It redrew borders and solidified Britain as the dominant maritime power, gaining substantial territories in North America, the Caribbean, and India. It had a bunch of huge consequences that really impacted the world, but won't really impact this story. You see, the important part here is about the Britain land in North America that was gained during the war. Toronto switched hands and now they were British. The first British colony established in present-day Toronto dates back to 1793, when Lieutenant Governor John Graves Simcoe selected the area as the capital of Upper Canada. Simcoe actually recognized the strategic importance of the location, situated on the northern shore of Lake Ontario, with access to vital waterways and trade routes. Originally known as York, the settlement began its transformation under Simcoe's vision. The town was carefully planned, with grid street layouts and key infrastructure developed to support the growing population. Government House is a beautiful example. The official residence of the Lieutenant Governor, it was constructed as a symbol of British authority. A jail and a courthouse were also built, reflecting the emerging legal and administrative institutions. But you see, trouble was brewing down south. The 13 colonies were independent, and they still got beef with Britain. So you see, during the War of 1812, York faced multiple attempts at invasion by the United States. The conflict was sparked by a range of issues, including trade restrictions and territorial disputes. It resulted in a series of military engagement in the region. In April 1913, American forces launched a successful attack on York, capturing the town and causing significant destruction. The invaders set fire to key buildings, including the Parliament House and the Lieutenant Governor's residence. However, York's residents demonstrated resilience and determination in the face of adversity. The British and Canadian forces, led by Major General Roger Hale Sheaffe, regrouped and continued to resist American advances. The Battle of York served as a rallying point for the local population, who were motivated to defend their homes and way of life. The subsequent engagements, including the Battle of Stony Creek and the Battle of Beaver Dams, showcased the strategic importance of the region and the determination of the defenders. These battles played a significant role in preventing further American advances into Upper Canada, effectively safeguarding York from complete occupation. The failed American attempts to capture the city demonstrated the tenacity of the British, Canadian, and Indigenous forces who successfully defended their territory. But these events also highlighted the importance of York as a key military and future economic center within the region and the whole country. Following the war, the establishment of the Erie Canal in 1825 further contributed to York's growth and development. The canal connected to the Great Lakes, to the Hudson River, and the Atlantic Ocean, opening up new trade routes and positioning York as a vital transportation and commercial hub. The town attracted merchants, entrepreneurs, and settlers seeking opportunities in its expanding economy. Industries such as manufacturing, trade, and finance flourished, driving the rapid growth of the population. By 1830, York had a population of 2,860, a significant rise from the 1,700 they had 4 years previously in 1826. They had more than double their population in 4 years, and I know the number is small, but that's still impressive that infrastructure was able to keep following this huge rate of growth. By the mid-19th century, York had undergone a significant transformation. In 1834, the town was renamed Toronto, which is derived from the indigenous term Toronto, meaning place where trees stand in water. The population continued to soar as immigration from various parts of the world, including the British Isles and Europe, flocked to the city in search of new opportunities and a better life. Toronto became known for its diverse population. Fast forward to the 1960s, and during this period, Toronto underwent a period of modernization and urban renewal. And this is when you start seeing high-rise buildings began to dominate the skyline, reshaping the city. Constructions of iconic landmarks like the Toronto Dominion Centre and the CN Tower showcased Toronto's ambition and progress. In 1960, it had 1.7 million residents calling the city home, compared to the huge 2.4 million that did at the end of the decade. But Toronto wasn't quite done growing yet. You see, while Toronto was busy growing to the east of it, Quebec was undergoing a quiet revolution, and nationalism started to grow in the province. This all led to a referendum of independence of the province. And while the no side won, this had a significant impact on Toronto's economy and population growth. You see, following the referendum, Toronto saw an influx of individuals and businesses, both from Quebec and other parts of Canada. Many English-speaking Canadians and businesses actually viewed Toronto as a stable and prosperous alternative in case Quebec chose to separate from Canada. And all this migration of talent and resources further bolstered Toronto's economy, driving economic growth, job opportunities, and investment in various sectors. The city's diverse population expanded even more, as people from different cultural backgrounds and regions sought opportunities and stability in Toronto. The referendum acted as a catalyst, propelling Toronto's economic and population growth and cementing its position as Canada's leading city. You see, after the 1960s, Toronto's population growth really slowed down, and for the first time in its history, it had a growth rate lower than 2%. This was until the referendum, where for a decade from 1982 to 1991, where the growth rate bounced back to 2% for the last time. Today, Toronto is the largest city in Canada. It holds immense economic and cultural significance within the country. With a robust and diverse economy, it plays a pivotal role in driving growth and innovation. Toronto's GDP stands at over $400 billion. The city serves as a global financial hub, hosting the Toronto Stock Exchange and numerous multinational corporations. Its thriving industries include finance, technology, film, and television production. Additionally, Toronto boasts a vibrant art and culture scene with world-class museums, galleries, theaters, and festivals that attract both local and international visitors. Oh, and also they made Drake. With a population of over 1 million people, Edmonton is Canada's 5th largest city, behind Ottawa. However, it is the most northern city with a population of over 1 million people. Take a look at this map. Now, of course, this is Canada, but as you can see, these are the cities with populations exceeding 1 million people. Edmonton is by far the most northern, but have you ever wondered why and how it grew to become one of Canada's largest cities? Make sure you subscribe and let's dive into Edmonton's rapid rise. Now, Edmonton's European history begins here. The Northwest Company traders established Fort Augustus north of Edmonton in 1795. A year later, the Hudson's Bay Company, a rival to the Northwest Company in the North American fur trade, built Edmonton House, which was later named Fort Edmonton, beside the Fort Augustus. However, Edmonton's settlement would only begin in the 1870s, with pioneer farmers living in rustic log cabins along the river. These farms served as the foundation for the 1882 survey of the land into river lots. 1885 Street and Fort Edmonton Park represent Edmonton's early hamlet. Edmonton was incorporated as a town in 1894. The town included the McLaughlin and modern Boyle Street, which was the original downtown. With the arrival of the Canadian Pacific Railway across the river in nearby South Edmonton in 1891, which was incorporated in 1899 as Strathcona, and the federal government's successful campaign to lure settlers to Canada's west later that decade, Edmonton began to prosper as an agriculture distribution and processing center. The long-awaited arrival of the Canadian Northern Railway, which became part of the Canadian National Railways in 1919, coincided with the establishment of Alberta as a province and the designation of Edmonton as its capital in 1906. These events aided Edmonton's growth and development and integration with a number of nearby towns, beginning with Strathcona in 1912, significantly increasing Edmonton's area and population. The real estate boom abruptly ended though just prior to World War I, causing the city's population to plummet from over 72,500 in 1914 to under 54,000, only 2 years later. During the war, the high rate of volunteer enlistment in the army contributed to the population decline. During the 1920s and 1930s, the city's population and economy grew slowly before taking off during and after World War II. During World War II, Edmonton served as a staging area for military operations, as well as the construction of the Alaska Highway, Blatchford Field, later Edmonton City Center Airport, and it was a Royal Canadian Air Force base in Edmonton, and it played an important military role that lasted throughout the Cold War. During World War II, the United States military used the field as its base of operations for Alaska defense, but after outgrowing that facility, it built another one north of the city. On February 13th, 1947, the first major oil discovery in Alberta was made near the town of Leduc, south of Edmonton. Oil reserves were discovered in the southern part of Alberta as early as 1914, but they produced very little oil in comparison to those around Edmonton. Additional oil reserves were discovered near the town of Redwater in the late 1940s and early 1950s. Because of the majority of Alberta's oil reserves were concentrated in central and northern Alberta, Edmonton became the center of the oil industry in the province. The subsequent oil boom established Edmonton as the oil capital of Canada, and the city's population increased from 149,000 to 269,000 during the 1950s. Following a relatively calm but still prosperous period in the 1960s, the city's growth accelerated in tandem with high global oil prices caused by the 1973 oil crisis and the 1979 Iranian Revolution. The oil boom of the 1970s and 1980s came to an abrupt end with a sharp drop in international oil prices and the implementation of the National Energy Program in 1981. Now, from 1980 to 1985, the Canadian federal government's energy policy was known as the National Energy Program. The economically national policy sought to ensure Canadian energy independence, but it was strongly opposed by the private sector and the oil-producing Western or Canadian provinces, particularly Alberta. The NEP was established on October 28, 1980 by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau's Liberal government in response to the two oil crises of the 1970s. Its three main goals were to increase Canadian ownership of the oil industry, price energy fairly for Canadian consumers, and provide Canadian energy self-sufficiency. The NEP was also intended to promote lower prices through price controls, to promote oil exploration in Canada, to promote alternative energy sources, and to increase federal government revenue from oil sales through a variety of taxes and revenue sharing with the Western Canadian provinces. The NEP proved to be a highly contentious policy initiative, eliciting strong opposition and outrage in Western Canada, particularly in Alberta. Peter Lougheed, the province premier, was a vocal opponent of the NEP, claiming that it interfered with provincial jurisdiction and unfairly deprived Alberta of oil revenue. But returning to Edmonton, West Edmonton Mall, the world's largest at the time, opened in 1981. The mall, which is still the largest in North America, is one of Alberta's most popular tourist destinations. In the late 1990s, the cities entered a recent period of economic recovery and prosperity, aided by a strong recovery in oil prices and further economic diversification. While oil production and refining continue to be the foundation of many Edmonton jobs, the city's economy managed to diversify significantly. Downtown Edmonton has seen rapid development in recent years, as it's located on a relatively flat prairie landscape distinguished by the meandering North Saskatchewan River. The river and its tributaries that flow into the city cut steep ravines throughout the urban landscape. And because of the presence of these ravine systems, many miles of linear parks have been built, inviting both summer and winter recreation. The central business district, with its many high-rise office and condominium buildings, is located north of the river. The 28-story Epcor Tower, built in 2011, was the first new office tower in 22 years, and the low-rise steel and glass art gallery of Alberta, built in 2010, are two distinctive structures that transformed the city's skyline in the early 21st century. However, the downtown core's architecture is not entirely modern. The Alberta Legislature Building, built in 1912, is notable for its Beaux Art style. This economic prosperity is attracting a large number of workers from across the country. Between 2006 and 2010, 83,000 new residents were expected to move to Edmonton, more than doubling the rate predicted by city planners. Many of the new workers who have relocated to the city are young men and come to work. The Edmonton metropolitan area surpassed 1 million people in 2008, making it the most northern city in North America with a metropolitan population of more than 1 million. Now, I'll end this story here because, well, Alberta as a whole has slowed down, primarily due to low oil prices. Edmonton, though, is still a beautiful and vibrant city with a diverse population and pretty well-paying job. If you've learned something new today, please like, subscribe, and comment what you want to see next in the comments below. I'll see you on the next one. With a population of 1.4 million, Calgary is the 5th largest metro in Canada, and it has grown far past expectations. You see, the first European recorded in the area only happened in 1787. Now, this is the second Alberta city that we cover on this channel, and if you've seen my video on Edmonton, I'd first like to say that I forgot to add, it's the northernmost city in North America, not in the world. Secondly, make sure you subscribe, and let's get right into Calgary's rocky rise. Now, the Calgary area has been inhabited by multiple First Nations since at least 11,000 years ago, but it wasn't until 1787 that David Thompson, then 17 years old, spent the winter with a band of Piikani Nation along the Bow River. But there was only one little issue. You see, this young 17-year-old worked for the Hudson's Bay Company as a land surveyor. Therefore, he never really settled in Calgary. We would have to wait until 1873 for the first European settler, named John Glenn, to settle in the area. A decade or so later, in 1881, the federal government started giving out leases for land in the area for ranching, which would be the first major catalyst for immigration. They were giving up to 100,000 acres, and only 2 years later, the Canadian Pacific Railway would reach the area. Now, not only did people have an economic reason to visit Calgary, but with the arrival of the train, it would be easier than ever. Furthermore, the Canadian Pacific Railway began selling lots around the station, which I imagine would have been ideal for markets. However, in 1884 and 1885, well, these were not the best years for the city. You see, one of the councillors threatened an undercover RCMP officer, which resulted in his arrest, and this started a snowball effect in which fines were given out to journalists who criticized the judge, who then arrested that journalist, and this whole snowball effect ended with the town pretty much not having a functioning government. And this was one of the reasons why in 1886 a fire completely destroyed Calgary's downtown, because no one was capable of running the government. Although 14 buildings were destroyed, no one was injured. The question of provincehood was on everyone's mind in Calgary at the turn of the century. Alberta was proclaimed a province on September 1st, 1905, with Edmonton as the provisional capital. You see, the legislature would have to choose the permanent location. There were many supporters that actually did want Calgary to be chosen. However, in a 16-8 vote, Edmonton kept the title. Not giving up on being a major city in the new province, Calgary threw their hat in the ring to have the provincial university built there. But once again, they were defeated, and the University of Alberta was built in the city of Strathcona, which would later be merged with Edmonton. Now, the 20th century would be a productive one for Calgary, with built-up areas being serviced by power and water between 1905 and 1912. In 1909, actually, a 7-mile track of municipally owned street railway system opened in Calgary. And with 250,000 passengers per month recorded by 1910, I think this was a success. The period of 1906 and 1911 would actually be the largest population growth period in the city's history, from 12,000 inhabitants to 43 inhabitants in the 5-year period. And now, I told you this period would be productive. In 1908, we would see one of the biggest attractions in Calgary open up, the annual Stampede, which gathered over 100,000 people during the 6-day debut event, which was a huge success. Now, zooming through, we end up to the 1970s, where we would see a more vulnerable Calgary. You see, the 70s and the 80s were a period of economic boom and bust. Beginning with the 1970s energy crisis, Calgary became a center of significant investment and growth. Its population increased from 330,000 to 636,000 over a 20-year period, from 1966 to 1986. High-rise buildings would be erected during this economic boom, with more office space being opened in Calgary in 1979 than in New York and Chicago combined. However, following the implementation of the National Energy Program in 1984 and a drop in world oil prices, this marked the end of Calgary's boom. You see, the drop in oil prices hurt so bad that the city cut services to ease a $16 million deficit, and 421 employees were laid off. Population would decrease for its first time in history during a 12-month period, and 300,000 homes would be foreclosed. The low prices were so bad that it would take until the 1990s for an economic recovery. However, Calgary didn't seem worried in the slightest, with them securing $270 million in funding and being selected to host the 1988 Winter Olympic Games, being the first Winter Games host in Canada. Calgary not only had big money funding, but they also decided to build the Games arena from scratch, with the Canada Olympic Park alone costing $200 million. This big gamble, however, seemed to pay off, with the city experiencing a major economic boom, and studies estimating it generated $1.4 billion across Canada, with 70% of that being in Alberta alone. If we look at present day Calgary, oil and gas is still an important part. However, tourism and high tech is also becoming significant industries, with over 3.1 million people now visiting the city annually. Now, before ending off the video, did you know Calgary also has one of the first light rail systems in North America? Their C-Train system carries approximately half of Calgary downtown workers. Now, if you'd like to see a video on this busy system, make sure to let me know in the comments down below. Also, make sure you like the video and subscribe, it helps me just a ton. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one. Step into the vibrant streets of Edo, a city that will later become the bustling Tokyo we know today. In the 15th century, Edo was a small fishing village situated along the eastern coast of Japan. However, its destiny would soon change dramatically. In the 17th century, the Tokugawa shogunate establishes rule over Japan, with Edo as its political center. The shogunate implemented a strict social and political system known as a Tokugawa Bakufu, which aimed to maintain stability and control throughout the country. You see, under the system, power was centralized in the hands of the shogun and his appointed samurai. Living Edo during the Tokugawa period meant adhering to the rigid social hierarchy. The samurai class enjoyed privileges and held positions of authority, while the commoners, including merchants, farmers, and artisans, faced limitations on their social mobility. Despite these restrictions, Edo's population grew rapidly, as people from various backgrounds flocked to the city seeking economic opportunities. The Tokugawa shogunate implemented policies that contributed to Edo's development. They invested in infrastructure projects, including the constructions of roads, bridges, and waterways, which facilitated trade and communication. The shogunate also established regulations to control commerce, ensuring stable economic growth. Edo somehow became a hub of trade, with markets and guilds prospering. However, as the Tokugawa shogunate consolidated its power, it faced several challenges that would eventually lead to its demise. External pressures, such as the arrival of Western powers, and demands for trade and diplomatic relations. You see, this exposed the weaknesses of the isolationist policies pursued by the shogunate. Internal dissatisfaction among the samurai class and economic disparities among the social classes also contributed to the growing unrest. The decline of the shogunate culminated in the late 19th century with the Meiji Restoration, and this marked a period of rapid modernization and the end of feudal rule in Japan. And after the Meiji Restoration in 1868, Tokyo became the new capital of Japan, replacing Kyoto. This marked a significant shift from the feudal Japan to a modern nation state. The city underwent rapid transformation and development in various aspects. You see, under this new Meiji government, Tokyo experienced extensive urban planning and infrastructure projects. Roads, railways, and modern buildings were constructed, transforming the city landscape. The government established educational institutions, including the University of Tokyo, which became a center for intellectual and academic pursuits. Tokyo's population also witnessed a remarkable growth. During this period in 1968, the population was estimated to be around 750,000, but by 1900 it had surged to over 1.5 million people. The city attracted migrants from rural areas seeking employment opportunities and a new way of life in the urban setting. And this is when the government encouraged industrialization and modernization, attracting foreign investment in technology. Factories, modern industries, and commercial enterprises began to emerge, contributing to Tokyo's economic growth and status as a major industrial center. And you see, culturally, Tokyo became a hub of artistic and literary activities. The city saw the rise of modern art, literature, theater, and cinema. Western influences were assimilated into Japanese culture, giving birth to new artistic movements and expressions. Tokyo's development as the capital of Japan set the stage for its future as a global metropolis. The population continued to grow, with the city proper reaching over 2 million by 1920. From 1920 to 1938, Tokyo experienced significant changes and challenges as it continued to develop as a major urban city in Japan. During this period, the city was under the political regime of the Taisho, an early Showa period. Tokyo saw continued population growth, reaching over 3 million residents by 1930. The city became a bustling metropolis with expanding neighborhoods, commercial districts, and a modern infrastructure. However, rapid urbanization also led to overcrowding, inadequate housing, and poor sanitation in some areas, which were significant challenges for many residents. As Japan pursued industrialization and militarization during the 1930s, Tokyo saw further development in manufacturing and military-related industries. The city became a hub for government institutions, military headquarters, and defense-related production. The government's focus on military expansion resulted in increased censorship, nationalism, and strict control over public expression. Living conditions for many Tokyo residents were challenging, especially for the working class. The socioeconomic disparities were evident, with a stark contrast between the wealthy elite and the impoverished population. The Great Depression, which started in 1929, also had a significant impact on Tokyo, leading to economic hardship, unemployment, and social unrest. During this time, Tokyo faced the consequences of the Japanese aggressive foreign policies, which ultimately led its involvement in the Second Sino-Japanese War and later World War II. The city experienced air raids, rationing, and the mobilization of resources for the war effort. These hardships further exacerbated the challenges faced by the population. It is important to note that while Tokyo experienced aspects of growth and development during this period, there were also significant socioeconomic challenges, political restrictions, and the looming impact of war. This complex reality shaped the lives of Tokyo residents and set the stage for the city's transformations during and after World War II. From their involvement in World War II until its end, life in Tokyo was marked by significant challenges, both for the city as a whole and for its residents. You see, the political system during this period was characterized by the dominance of the militaristic government and the strict control exerted by the Imperial Japanese Army. Tokyo, like many other major cities in Japan, was heavily targeted during the war. The city suffered devastating air raids, resulting in widespread destruction of buildings, infrastructure, and the loss of life. The bombings caused immense hardship for the population, with many losing their homes and loved ones. Rationing of essential goods became a common practice as resources were directed towards the war effort. An average person living in Tokyo during this time, life was filled with fear, uncertainty, and hardships. You see, the constant threat of bombings created a climate of insecurity, and citizens had to adapt to living in air raid shelters and taking precautions to ensure their safety. The scarcity of food, fuel, and basic necessities made everyday life challenging, and people had to rely on their resilience and resourcefulness to get by. Despite these difficulties, the city saw some development during the war. Tokyo became a center for military production and logistical support. The government implemented strict controls over industries and resources, directed them towards the war effort. However, the focus on military production often came at the expense of civilian needs, and this exacerbated the challenges already faced by the population. It's important to acknowledge that this period was characterized by authoritarian rule, propaganda, and the suppression of dissidents. The militaristic government sought to maintain control over the population, limiting freedom of speech and expression. Citizens were expected to demonstrate loyalty and support for the war effort. From 1940 until 1945, the population of Tokyo actually shrank, from 12.7 million to 9.3 million for the metropolitan area. The afterwar period marked a significant period of recovery and rebuilding for Tokyo. The city faced immense challenges as it dealt with the aftermath of the war, including widespread destruction, scarcity of resources, and the need to rebuild both physically and socially. In the immediate aftermath of the war, Tokyo lay in ruins. Many buildings were destroyed, and essential infrastructure was severely damaged. The city had to be rebuilt from the ground up, and a massive construction project had to take place. The resilience and determination of the Japanese people played a crucial role in the rapid reconstruction of Tokyo. The city experienced a construction boom as new buildings, roads, and utilities were established, transforming the urban landscape. Life as an average person in Tokyo during this period was still a struggle though. The scarcity of resources continued to be a challenge, and people faced hardships in securing food, housing, and basic necessities. The government implemented various measures to address these challenges, including rationing systems and assistance to programs to support the population. Politically, the post-war era saw a significant shift in Japan's governance. The country adopted a new constitution in 1947, which established a democratic system and promoted fundamental rights and freedom. The political landscape changed as political parties emerged, and a more participatory system took shape. The focus shifted from militarism to rebuilding a peaceful and prosperous nation. As Tokyo rebuilt itself, it became a symbol of Japan's post-war recovery and economic growth. The city had experienced a rapid industrialization and urbanization, attracting investments and businesses. Economic reforms and government initiatives led to the emergence of new industries, contributing to Tokyo's transformation into a global economic powerhouse. However, alongside the progress, challenges persisted. The memories of the war and the loss experienced by many were still fresh. Tokyo also faced social and cultural changes as it grappled with the impact of Western influences and the process of rebuilding its identity. But enough of the hardships, let's fast forward to the 1990s. Tokyo experienced significant growth and transformation. The city further solidified its position as a global economic and cultural hub. The period witnessed advancements in technology, urban development, and the emergence of new industries. Tokyo continued to expand physically, with the construction of impressive skyscrapers, modern infrastructure, and improved transportation systems. The cityscape transformed, and iconic landmarks such as the Tokyo Skytree and Roppongi Hills reshaped the skyline. Urban renewal projects revitalized neighborhoods and created vibrant spaces for shopping, entertainment, and leisure. Life for an average person in Tokyo during this period was dynamic and fast-paced. The city offered diverse opportunities for employment, education, and cultural experiences. Technological advancements such as the widespread adoption of mobile phones and the internet brought convenience and connectivity to daily life. Tokyo's economy thrived, driven by sectors like finance, technology, entertainment, and fashion. The city became a center for global businesses and attracted international investments. The bustling streets were filled with a mix of traditional and modern establishments, ranging from traditional shops to high-end luxury brands. And while Tokyo experienced prosperity, it also faced challenges. Economic recessions and financial crises had an impact on the city, leading to shifts in the job market and income disparities. The fast-paced lifestyles and high living costs posed challenges for some residents, contributing to issues such as overwork and societal pressures. And since Tokyo has continued its remarkable journey of development, solidifying its position as the largest city in the world, the cityscape has evolved with constructions of even taller skyscrapers, innovative architectural designs, and cutting-edge infrastructure. Tokyo has embraced sustainability, incorporating green spaces and eco-friendly initiatives into its urban fabric. Life for an average person in Tokyo has a blend of tradition and modernity. The city offers a unique balance of ancient cultural heritage and futuristic technological advancements. Residents enjoy efficient public transportation systems, state-of-the-art facilities, and a wealth of entertainment, dining, and shopping options. Tokyo's vibrant street fashion and pop culture have become renowned worldwide. Tokyo's economy has thrived, driven by diverse industries such as finance, technology, entertainment, and tourism. The city has attracted global businesses, startups, and creative industries, fostering this innovation and entrepreneurship. It has become a global center for research and development, attracting top talent from around the world. Tokyo's cultural scene continues to flourish, with world-class museums, art galleries, theaters, and music venues. The city even hosts major international events, including the Olympic Games, showcasing its ability to host large-scale events. However, Tokyo's rapid growth and urbanization has also brought challenges. The city faces issues such as overcrowding, housing affordability, and environmental sustainability. Efforts, though, have been made to address these challenges through urban planning, efficient resource management, and community development initiatives. Despite these challenges, Tokyo remains a symbol of perseverance and resilience. The city's ability to adapt and innovate has contributed to its status as a global leader in various domains. Tokyo's rise as the largest city in the world can be attributed to its unique blend of culture, technology, and economic prowess, making it a truly remarkable metropolis that continues to captivate the world's imagination. And if you've enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, subscribe. It helps boost the channel and helps me keep being motivated to post these types of videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.